Hi, Liz. How are you today?
Hey, Alex, I'm great. It's so great to see you and be having this conversation with you.
Oh, well, same here. Of course, we've been working together for quite some time, and I've been, following your work, which I actually find rather fascinating. And of course, for those who are listening, in case people are less familiar, as a firm, we do work with a lot of people who went through divorce at some point in the past. And I can imagine how there are at least some listeners who are perhaps contemplating a change of their relationship. So I really thought, what you have to share can be quite helpful to many.
Mm.
But before we get started, of course, just a quick introduction for those who haven't met you yet, Liz. Liz Lerner is a life coach, psychotherapist, author, and artist. Liz is an expert in communication and divorce wellness who guides individuals through the complexities of separation and divorce. Leveraging her credentials in psychology, communication, and energetics, she founded Divorce Well and Thrive, a platform dedicated to empowering individuals to navigate divorce with resilience and optimism. I love that introduction. And of course, you wrote the book, which
Yeah,
is great. And I'll tell
yeah,
you, I read it twice actually earlier in the year, and of course, in preparation for this conversation. I love your story because it's different because you're sharing your story, and of course, there's so much practical advice.
mm.
So I thought for us to start this conversation. So can you share what inspired you to write Divorce Well and Thrive, and how is it different from other divorce
Other books.
guides?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And, certainly I wrote the book so that more and more people could really have the tools to do this differently. In our culture, you say the word divorce and the air gets sucked out of the room. And that's really unfortunate that people have had such
Yeah.
terrible experiences. So when my former husband and I decided to get divorced, we really wanted it to be a very different experience for our
Hmm.
child,
Hmm.
for in our community. Um, if one doesn't actually say how they're doing something like divorce, the
Hmm.
community decides for you what that's going to be like, right? They take all that information from the world or their experience
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
say, "Oh, it's horrible," and "Oh, I'm so sorry," and all that stuff. And um, so part of the reason I wrote the book was in that process, I um, we had a divorce party, a
Yeah.
separation party.
Yeah. That's.
And
Mhm.
what I learned from sending out my invitation or our invitation was one, that nobody could believe the formatting of what we were doing, which was reforming our family
Mhm.
versus creating a
Mhm.
big chasm. And also that it was not a joke.
Yeah.
Like it was
Yeah.
such a weird idea to people that people just said, are you kidding? Like, is this a joke? Because, and then I started to hear all the trauma.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
every person who called me had a story about their parents, their own divorce, their grandparents' divorce, somebody's divorce in their life that affected them so traumatically that they um, didn't know what to do with the information.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it really, along with, I'd been working with couples for many, many years before I wrote the book and coaching people in divorce for many, many years. But doing it myself and trying out this method that I
Yeah.
share in the book um, and that I coach people with, learning that it worked, I really
Hmm.
felt like, there's so much that could be improved in this
Yeah.
situation if people do a couple of simple things.
Hmm.
So that's why.
Well, and I do have a follow-up question on that, but I must say this, Liz, again, when I was reading your book and you just
Yeah, yeah.
mentioned this, you're the only person I know, and I would very much, eventually would like to know more people like that
Yeah.
who had a divorce party.
Yeah.
It goes without saying, and I do want to keep this conversation, positive. Usually it goes the other way around, but it's just fascinating that you ended up doing it that way.
Well, I want to make a little caveat because a lot of the parties that are around like that are actually have the opposite intent that we had. They're like, yay, I'm free, and it was like, well,
Yeah.
this is about, it was not only a choice to really tell our community about reforming, but it was
Mhm.
strategic. And I think it's one thing we'll probably get to later in the conversation, but there are a few very strategic
Yeah.
pieces that really prepare you and prepare how you communicate with your family or friends or, school communities or spiritual
Yeah.
communities that make a difference. And so we actually, by doing it, the invitation was enough. It
Mhm.
really set the tone and also protected us and our child from people projecting stuff
Yeah.
onto us or feeling awkward or not knowing how to talk with us. I mean, we wanted to still be invited to the same parties if people
Right.
were willing
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
that, right?
All
Like
of your
we,
connections, your network. Yeah.
and so that ebbs and flows. But um, yeah, it was really fun.
Well, again, I know I said this already, but I found it rather fascinating. And actually, I think it would be a perfect follow-up on that. So your book is described as a guide to being your best under the worst circumstances.
Best self under the
So
worst circumstances is
yeah.
the subtitle. Yeah.
So what does this mean in practical terms for someone who is perhaps, about to start navigating their own divorce
We're thinking about it.
or thinking about it? Yeah.
So, emotional situations, particularly hurtful situations or angry situations, are very difficult to navigate
Yeah.
without emotional reactivity, right? What I mean by that is maybe having a harsh tone or starting taking the bait for a fight or trying to find like, oh, I'm going to get back at this person, whatever. But when people are hurt, their best selves don't necessarily always come out. And
Yeah.
the book really shares, or the coaching I do really shares, um, how to operate without emotional reactivity so that not only can you do the best for yourself, but the situation can, look, this is not a fun situation, even if, you do a party, right? People don't
Mhm.
get divorced because everything's fabulous.
Right. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know so it's figuring out a way for you to have a vision of how you actually want this to unfold,
Mhm.
and then recognizing that there's a life after whatever
Yeah.
this event is, and what you do now affects what happens then.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's important because especially if there are reasons that you might stay connected to a person, you're in business together, you have
Yeah.
children,
Yeah.
there's extended family, something. Some people, they never have to see the person again for the rest of their lives. Okay, fine, great. But a lot of people that they don't have that situation. So thinking ahead and realizing what they do now really affects their future,
Mhm.
um, makes a huge difference. And so there are a lot of ways that people can do that. Neutral is better than, like, doesn't have to be great, but neutral is good,
Mhm.
to
Well,
be able to have a conversation um, in neutrality
yeah.
is really helpful, because if we had a conversation and I got upset or you got upset and we were being emotional, our
Mhm.
frontal lobes, which is our,
Yeah.
you know, making sure we're kind of here and now and functioning in the here and now, would be offline because we go into
Mhm.
survival mode, and then all holds barred, right?
And you're making such a good point, Liz. Of course, we're focusing on a particular subject today, but even when it comes to, I would say,
Yeah, yeah,
general investing outside of divorce and all
yeah,
that, people tend to make some of their worst decisions in terms of their investing when they feel bad about certain circumstances.
Or
But again,
threatened in some way, or
yeah.
or even making financial decisions from an emotional place, is very tricky, uh, and
Well,
probably shouldn't happen.
it's Liz, this is again great. This kind of leads to the next question I wanted to kind of dive into. Of course, money topics, even outside of divorce, and I can of course tell you from my
Yeah,
professional
yeah.
experience, they can be rather, emotional, sometimes even tense. Of course, people do worry about their money, even though sometimes they wouldn't necessarily openly admit that, but they certainly do.
Oh,
So what are some of the ways, practical ways
yeah.
specifically, to make those conversations easier?
Yeah. So, what you're saying is very important because, particularly when people are changing the formation of a relationship or dissolving a marriage, or money is the hottest topic there is. People worry about their
Mhm.
survival. People worry about is it fair? People are worried about, am I going to lose everything? There's a lot that goes on about money, and a lot of it is emotional. Some of it knowing the individual person, some of it may be real, some of it may not be real. But the most important thing I think people need to do, especially even if they've already started the process, but particularly if they're just thinking about it,
Mhm.
is to really understand, do their homework,
Yeah.
right? Know what their financial picture is. Know what is in their name, know what is in joint name, know what is in the partner's or spouse's name, know about the insurance, know all of the things that, frankly, both people in a relationship should know anyway. Because if something were, you know, we don't wish this on anyone, but something unexpected happens and somebody all of a sudden needs to
Mhm.
know and they don't, it, that creates even more stress than whatever the tragedy is that occurred, right? So, or equal. But so really doing your homework, talking to a financial advisor, uh, understanding what changes if a marriage is dissolving, knowing what you should have your name on
Yeah.
if you're thinking about having a marriage dissolving. And a lot of times, I mean, couples I've worked with have gone into financial advisors together,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
whether they're thinking about divorce or not, to kind of, for the reason I said earlier, like people should know. And then an individual should know what is important to them financially if they're going to have a conversation about separation.
Mhm.
And they should know
Mhm.
that before they have that conversation about separation.
Well, and Liz, this is again very helpful. You at least partially addressed my next question in terms of what is it that people should be focusing on when they're, contemplating a change in their marital relationship. But in terms of the timing, perhaps you can touch on that. Um, I'm not sure if people can necessarily time things like that, but how would you approach that? 3, 6, perhaps 9 months ahead of the projected date? Do you have any guidelines?
I think because everyone's situation is so different,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, I don't feel like there's a rule of thumb, but I would
Fair enough.
say, you know, if somebody is thinking that this, like sometimes people work very, very hard on relationships over a period of years.
Yeah.
Um, and I think if there's a feeling, let's say 5 years or, whatever, if there's a feeling that you don't know really which way it's going to go, you're doing your best to have it be okay. I would still do that financial planning. I would think ahead and go, well, if this were going to occur, how can we both be in the best situation possible? And that's not about winning. It's not about
Yeah.
taking everything. It's about people think that winning is the way to go. And then if winning is the way to go, then there's usually a great deal of, um, for lack of a better word, badness that occurs. And um, winning in this situation is actually not causing trauma and harm.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
the win here.
Yeah.
Um, so if financially, I think years ahead isn't bad. What if someone is dealing with a potential inheritance? They need to know the laws. They need to
Yeah.
understand
Yeah.
that if
Yeah.
they commingle their finances, that inheritance is marital property. So
Yeah.
those are things that people should be aware of anyway,
Yeah.
but particularly in situations where they may feel like their relationship may not last. Um, but I think the most important timing is there are a couple of things that when it has to do with finances. One is, um, as I said, learning the laws, learning what you've got, learning what your name is on, learning what it should be on with a good financial advisor or an attorney. People will do free conversations just to
Mhm.
give people basic information heading into the
Well,
future, right?
yeah,
The other thing that I think is really important is not to have the conversation before you've done it,
that's,
right? Because
just
usually when
wanted to
people
interject with that.
say,
Yeah.
I can't, whatever emotional thing they're going to say, to introduce the idea that this person may not want to stay with the other person,
Mhm.
it's usually, if it's emotionally driven, not friendly. And then a whole chain of events starts happening. So my suggestion too, from a financial standpoint, as well as any other standpoint, is be very clear about how you want to have that conversation.
Well, Liz, this again, very helpful as you describe all of this. What comes to mind is one of the, I guess I'm going to call it engagements I had last year. That's right, it was last year. Someone reached out, asked for keep it confidential and
Yeah,
everything, which is of course how we normally do it. And the whole point was, my significant other is not even aware that I'm contemplating, a
right.
change here. So we've done, full analysis again, what it would look like, you know, with and without in some sense. And interested enough, I'm, happy to report there was, as far as I understand, at least they didn't move forward. So I very much hope that they came to some kind of
They
agreement
stay
that they're going
together,
to
in other
stay.
words.
That's
Yeah.
my understanding.
Yeah, great.
Again, we did the analysis and covered a lot of different pieces, but they decided to stay together. My next question, Liz, and this is actually one of the favorites, in terms of, again, some of the top three or top five, if you're willing to share, do's and don'ts when
Yeah.
it comes to planning. Like, so you talked about some of the things that
Financial
people
planning
should do.
particularly.
Sure, we can focus on the financial side. What are some of the things that people really should not be doing when they're contemplating divorce?
Well, I've really said pretty much what they should not be doing. But we'll go the do's and the don'ts. So
Sure.
obviously, I could do three, do your homework, do your homework, do your homework.
Mm-hmm.
But one is do your homework and then do it again.
Yeah.
And then what I really mean is don't make assumptions
Yeah.
about what you think you know, what you think the other partner would do or not do. Um, make sure you really understand your financial situation. And um, let's see what I did make a note about
Well,
that.
it's interesting, Liz, as you like one of the things that comes to mind when that was a while back, actually, pre-COVID, because everything now is pre and post-COVID. I actually attended one of the seminars in the subject, and I think you know exactly who I'm referring to, but I'm not going to mention his name. So he was describing, process of divorce, typical situation when they have an orange, right, and they always try to split it in half. You get my half,
Right.
when in practice, perhaps one of the spouses wants the juice and the other one wants the peel.
Right.
Perhaps he said it somehow else, but that really came to mind because, like, not to go in the weeds here, but even in terms of splitting assets, sometimes it can be very different compared to how you anticipated to begin with. And I'll tell you, I mean, I used to be much more involved in this. You can be very creative. kind of switching topics here a little bit, but what are some of the most common mistakes, Liz, that you know experienced in the past or in your practice?
I think one really important mistake is the belief that a divorce cannot be done well.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of clients come in and say it's impossible, that this won't be anything but a you know what show, right? And I think questioning the belief is really important, because when you
Yeah.
have a belief that is that finite, it doesn't give you room to be creative and to really figure out how you can have a collaborative conversation about this. Um, so I think that's very important. I also think that finding a way
Mm-hmm.
to come into neutral is very important. And
Yeah.
as you know, in the book, there's a technique that I created that really deals with how do you actually get present in the moment well enough to be actually in our moment
Mm-hmm.
together, and not be pushed by something somebody said in the past and a fear that you have about what's going to happen in the future. Because all of that is static, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with what our
Mm-hmm.
actual
Mm-hmm.
conversation is about. So it's a problem if I come to let's say a conversation with you, and let's say uh, one of us was annoyed in our previous conversation,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we never talked about it. We never cleared the air. Then either of us could be showing up in that conversation
Mm-hmm.
having the old conversation, right? Having the feelings from the old conversation or the thoughts about the old conversation. And so we're not really having the conversation we're having in this moment, because it's all goopy, right? And so what
Yep.
my technique does is it takes the goop away and allows you to be
Present.
prepared, strategic, calm, and know that when you're um, getting triggered by somebody, what you do about it. So, oh, here's a do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, don't take the bait.
Yeah.
Don't take the bait. And that's the other place that winning becomes an issue, right? Because everybody wants to win that argument.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And guess what? When you step back and let it pass, there is no argument.
Yeah.
There's
It's
nothing to go up against. So you go on with your day. And I think that's very, very important. There's some information about that in the book, but very, very important if people are in the process of separating but are not separated,
mm-hmm.
because they're still living in the environment where all those, fights about the dishwasher or whatever showed
Yeah.
up, right? So they're habits in a way. And to be able to just step back, hold on to your vision of what you actually want to have happen will propel your ability to step back.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, Liz, your book, which again, for those of you who are listening, I recommend it. At least for me personally, it had so many different nuggets of information that I can absolutely see how you would use them outside of divorce conversations. So very,
Yeah.
very
Like the first
practical.
part is really all about well, one, how do you think about divorce, but also how do you have a better relationship?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do you communicate better? How do you save it before you go to, get rid of it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Liz, one more question for you. Now we already shared a lot here, and of course, much more is in your book. But is there anything specific that you believe that everyone should really know? And of course, if anyone wants to reach out to you, and we'll include that in the actual newsletter, what's the best way to do that?
So one thing I do think that what everybody does need to know is that it is possible. Because I mean, I have tons of clients who could tell you that it's possible. You've got people who've read the book, that some who have worked with me, that can tell you in the, whatever that the endorsements in the beginning can tell you that it's possible. Even after like 40 years, by the way. Just had someone who managed to be lovely. It wasn't so lovely, but like issues, but it's possible.
Yeah,
If people want
amicable
to
enough.
work with me on this, I have a coaching practice on this. They can reach me at liz@yourinspiredchoices.com. They can read the book, Divorce Well and Thrive, Your Guide to Being Your Best Self Under the Worst Circumstances, on Amazon. They can go to the website, yourinspiredchoices.com, and find me.
Well, thank you, Liz. And we'll certainly include this information again in a newsletter to make sure that people can easily find it if they want to reach out to you.
Oh, and there are a couple of courses that are coming out in January.
Oh,
So,
that's awesome. So I guess the
one is
timing is
self,
perfect.
one
Okay.
is self,
Mhm.
like a self-taught course with journaling and homework and stuff, and the other I teach.
Awesome, Liz. Again, we'll include that as well.
Yeah.
Well, again, thanks so much. I really enjoyed it, and as always, I learned a couple of things myself. Thank you.
It's fun.